and then the reunion tour happened, and I was back in Philly, and it was in '99, and my mom had just died, and it was my birthday. It was September 20th. He was at the Wachovia Center, and then whatever it was, the Core States, I think then. And I went with this guy that I'm madly in love with, John Hunt. I couldn't believe it. And I got tickets through my funeral director, who's my best friend's family. So I got these great tickets, and I felt, and my mom died in July, and that was in September. And I felt, I felt healed. I lost myself completely in the music.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. I have a early riser joining me today. Barbara requested, hey, can we record a little bit earlier because my alarm clock wakes me up early. Barbara, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit why you get up so early.
Well, I am a chef by trade, and I have a new job that I've taken, and it's a small hotel on the Chesapeake Bay, and they eat breakfast. So I'm up cooking breakfast. So that's why I'm up at 5:15 in the morning.
Oh gosh, that sounds great. I love that. You know, right out of the last part of my senior year and the summer after my senior year in high school, so this would have been 1977, I worked at a Howard Johnson's.
Fantastic.
Hojo's, right? And
of course.
And I worked the breakfast shift, started at 6 a.m., got off at like 2:30 or 3. And I swear I could not get the smell of coffee out of my nose.
There's a lot of things in a restaurant that
right?
You can't get out of your nose.
No matter how often you showered, everything, it just smelled. The other thing is the good thing about being a waiter back then, and I still now, you always have money because of your tips, right? You don't have to wait to payday. And then back then I got a lot of coins, so I keep this jar, and I'd go to the bank to get the coins, and I have to roll up and everything. So
well, it also makes you a better human, I think, having been in food service. And you said something, I actually owned a restaurant up until 6 months or 4 or 5 months ago, something like that, 6 months ago, and COVID just took me out. And but I got my dream, and it was a great one. But I had a lot of young kids here in a rural area on the eastern shore of Maryland, and I told them, if you can wait a table, if you can pour a drink, if you can flip a burger, you'll always have a job. And that is the beauty of this business, even as difficult as it is now, because people aren't quite seeing my vision now. That's why it's so hard to get people to work. So
it's really hard. I run a call center, so I make the same argument that I go, if you learn how to take inbound phone calls, comfortable working customer service, they are always needed, despite all the talk about offshoring and in India and the Manila and elsewhere. Right. There is always a set of people in the US that want people to answer the phone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And want to speak to it, myself included.
Yeah.
I want to speak to a person.
Yeah.
Sure.
So tell me a little about yourself. You've established you're a chef. You've established you're in Maryland. Tell me a little bit more.
Well, I'm originally from right outside Philadelphia, not too far, about 15 minutes from Bryn Mawr, home of the Main Point. Okay. So I graduated high school in 79. So I back then, I knew people that actually went to that show.
Yeah.
And I'm from a big family. I'm the youngest of 7, and moved to New York after college, and worked on Wall Street. And after the crash in '87, I just, it wasn't for me. It wasn't my industry. Which I found
Yeah.
out. And then I started cooking at bartending and cooking at an Irish bar on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and kind of went from there, and ended up working with Bobby Flay before he was Bobby Flay. And so I had a great career in New York and moved out to Portland, Oregon, and then came back to Philly to take care of my parents, and which is very Bruce related because it was in '99, and the reunion tour. And so ended up back here, and never say you can't go home again, because there I was, 40 and single, in the twin bed next to my dad's room, going, when is this going to end? And,
Yeah.
But with zero regrets, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a wonderful time. But so, and then I ended up here in Maryland, where I got lucky enough to follow my dream, and I believed it, and my faith was rewarded, and I finally got my own restaurant at 52. So I was open for about 7 years, and I can't imagine doing anything else but cooking and making people happy and making great food. And so it's just me and my dog here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and live in an old renovated schoolhouse, and life is pretty good, I have to say, as difficult as it's been. So.
Yeah, I know you were not alone. A lot of people were hurt by COVID, and a lot of restaurants. In fact, you mentioned being a server. I also think if you've ever done food service or been a server, you tend to tip heavier.
Yeah. Yep.
And the other thing I did,
you also bus your table when you're sitting at the table.
Yes.
You stack your dishes.
Yeah. No, I read somewhere that some Instagram or something said things that you think you're doing to help, but you aren't. And it's like, and I'm like, sorry, I can't help but doing that.
I agree.
The other thing I did is, even before COVID, I always tipped to-go orders.
Yes.
Because I remember when I worked at Howard Johnson's, okay, Jesse, there's a to-go order, and it would take you all this time to box it up, and they would not leave you a tip. Ever.
Nope.
It was just, it felt like you were working without pay.
Yeah, right.
It's like, so I've always started, and now then that's a big thing with, and I appreciate that there was a lot of talk about when we went for that 1.5 2 years of lockdown, that so much food delivery that, the delivery drivers did get a little bit of love, I think, from a lot of people.
I totally agree with that. And I saw it. I converted to, my restaurant was just this little gem in this tiny little shore town that back in its heyday, it used to be a port for the ferries coming over from Baltimore, because there's a bridge there. And it was the summer, that big hotels, like the big old hotels and stuff. So now all of that went away, and it's this bucolic little town with a beach and me. I was the only restaurant, me and the pizza shop up the street. And ironically, they were from Philadelphia as well. So anyway, so people I was a destination, and had a deck over the bay, see the bay. And so I shifted to takeout when we were allowed here in Maryland. And people really, they made a lot of money for the girls that were packing up the bags, and I was able to tip the kitchen out and keep everybody. And then we started, 2 of my friends let me use their parking lots in town, which is about a 20-minute drive. And I did the Barbara's Buggy, because it was Barbara's on the Bay was the restaurant, and Barbara's Buggy. And we went to their parking lot, and people came and met us.
Oh,
and
nice.
and that was kind of the drop-off point. And so people were very generous, and I agree with you. I think I'm hopeful. And also I think that I know salaries for servers are legit now, and it is kind of a worker's an employee's time. And I just negotiated myself for my new job. And I said, no, this is what I'm worth. And if you want me, because we're so scarce, like, you've got to pay me, and I'm worth it, and I'll give you everything. I mean, my restaurant was successful. It wasn't because it wasn't successful. I just didn't have any people, and these kids were 17, and it was at the vaccinations were coming out, and they didn't want to get vaccinated, and I couldn't say, well, you can't work here if you're not vaccinated, and I had nobody. Either way, I had nobody.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's a different time, hopefully.
Yes, we will. We could spend all night, and we won't.
Exactly.
I am running to this. The issue I have in my day gig is that we actually were blessed. I work for a roadside assistant company for the RV industry, which got very busy, and we are struggling to find people. I mean, it is tough. So I always like to start at the beginning, talk about growing up outside of Philly. What kind of music were your family listening to? What kind of music did your parents listen to?
Well, they were big bands all the way. So,
all the way. Oh, cool.
All the way, sure. And the girl singers, my dad would say. So that's what we grew up on. And Benny Goodman and Jimmy and Tommy Dorsey and Gene Krupa and Glenn Miller. And so we grew up with that, and my parents loved to dance together. So there was they danced in the living room, and we grew up learning how to dance that way. And then the boys, so I'm the youngest of 7. So Joe, my oldest brother, is 72 and I'm 60. So there was there was a big gap in between, and a lot of noise, as you can imagine, and a big family, big Irish Catholic family. And so I listened to a lot of their music too. Up in the 3rd floor on the record player when they weren't home. So I was listening to the Doors Soft Parade when I was, in grade school. But I listened to what everybody else listened to at the time, I guess, probably Bobby Sherman and all that kind of stuff. But we were outside. Music wasn't as prevalent as it is today. We weren't as attached to our transistor radios as you were to an iPod. But my brother, one of my brothers, the guy across the street from us growing up, started a lighting company on his front porch in the suburbs of Philly. And it grew and grew and grew. And he turned into a big lighting company in rock and roll. And so my brother went to college for a year and a half and came home and quit college and started working for Bill McManus, and he had McManus Enterprises, and they did lighting on all these tours. So Mike was in rock and roll at a very early time for me. He was out with Jethro Tull and Elton John, and but he had all these friends. As he got longer, he was in the business. He ended up with U2 and never Springsteen, but his one of my sister, and they were with Kiss. He and my sister were both with Kiss. Pixie was wardrobe, and Mike did lighting. And so she dated a guy who was touring with Bruce on the River Tour, and so it had its benefits. But life in Bala Cynwyd, it's funny, there's a guy on Facebook whose dad always had a movie projector, always, Mr. Lombardi.
All right. Yes.
Always had the movie. Well, now his son has the movies and is editing and posting them on Facebook, and it's like watching, it's like, oh, there's Mrs. Hennessy and Mr. Hunt and Mr. Light and all these people, and they've all got the round cylindrical cocktail glasses, and they're smoking, and there's Cub Scouts, and they're smoking in the gym and drinking, and what a time it was. And there was a parade, actually. There's a fire engine, police cars, and I went to Catholic school, 12 years of Catholic school. So Bruce and I get it all.
Yeah.
And they blocked off streets, and we had a parade for some football game against St. Margaret's, the next town over. And I was talking to my sisters and my grade school friends that I'm still friends with, and like, do you remember that? But there we were, and they went by our house, and there's my dad, who's gone now, both my parents. And so it's really kind of crazy. We had an idyllic childhood and didn't know it at the time.
You know
When,
what?
you went out and your parents didn't care where you were,
Yeah,
Mrs. McKenna knew where you were, or Mrs.
yeah.
Jackson knew where you were, so.
It one of the things that comes up fairly often on the podcast is siblings, right?
Yeah.
You
Mm.
either are the oldest and you influence the youngers,
Yep.
or you're one of the youngers and you either were influenced, either you embrace their music or maybe sometimes you rebelled, right? Like, oh, I
Right.
don't want to take the same thing as my older brother or sister. I'm going
Yep.
to go with punk, or I'm going to go with grunge or something. So
Yeah.
I
Right.
love that that diversity of age, that if you're 5, he's 17. So
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
obviously that's almost like a second parent
Well,
for that.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And my sister went on to work on Broadway as a dresser for a long time. So, she worked in the theater forever. So there was always show tunes.
yeah,
And we grew up, listening to, and my mother loved show tunes. So Camelot was always on the record player
yeah,
when we had to clean the storage room in the third floor.
yeah,
So, and it's such a happy part of my childhood. And with COVID, the 7 of us, we live all over the country, and so we have reconnected through Zoom and through during COVID. And so one of my sisters, she likes to make lists and games and
yeah,
stuff. So Maggie, so the one everybody likes, the 6 of 7, everybody likes Maggie.
yeah,
And so she said, what's the music mom and dad dance to, and what do you
yeah.
remember, like what was playing? So very similar to your question. That's it's a very, very happy memories for sure. For sure.
You're talking about your Maggie and made me
Mm.
smile because before COVID, a couple of years ago, my wife and I went for a trip to Atlanta, and we ended up being on like a little tour bus, and there was a bunch of vineyards around Georgia that we went to, and there was Linda and I, and then like 3/4 of the other people on the bus were all from one family.
Oh, wow.
And they were talking about, and they pointed to one of the sisters and said, she's the youngest, but she's the boss. She runs everything. Like, she's the one who coordinates this, everything. And it was so funny. So there is, I imagine, a dynamic. I was one of 3, and
which
Linda,
has its own difficulties.
yes, and my wife was one of 3, and
Mm.
her older brother was 10 years older. There was a separation between that, but
That's a big gap.
we sometimes feel guilty that we only had the one boy. Like, Chris does not have that dynamics of
Well,
yeah,
it's an interesting dynamic because we just went to the shore in Philly. You go to the shore, down the shore,
yeah,
in South Jersey.
yes,
And we all got 6 of the 7 of us got together, and it was a nightmare, an
Mhm.
absolute nightmare. And I always envy these families that can take a tour bus and all get along, and everybody like,
yeah,
but if we all have this giant, my personality, we all have it.
okay,
So except for Quentin, he's the middle one. Quentin's the quiet one who just kind of slips
yeah.
around and does crossword puzzles and never did the dishes. He was always reading the encyclopedia. And so anytime you have trivia, like, Quentin's always the one to call. But so it was so interesting. And I find it fascinating that we can't all let each other be adults. We're so much nicer to strangers than we are to adults, but yet we get on these Zoom calls and it's like, it's magic. It's so
Yeah.
weird. I don't know.
No,
I don't know.
I think that's an interesting dynamic and pretty good. So
Yeah.
do you remember when you first discovered Bruce, and what about his music spoke to you? Can you articulate it?
Well, I came into it, in 75, when Born to Run came out, I was in 8th grade. So by high school, I went to a big Catholic high school. I was starting to hear about it. As a matter of fact, I went to Archbishop Carroll in Radnor, which is not far from the main point either, from Bryn Mawr. and they couldn't sell enough tickets. That's the story. The high school that couldn't sell enough tickets
Okay.
was my high school, ironically. So I've always had this Bruce connection. It's really kind of weird, but when I really first got into his music was in college, and I went to school in Western PA, but with friends from North Jersey, from Berkeley Heights, and near, not far from where, Asbury and that area. So I heard more, and then I wasn't really super into it, but I knew it. And then I went home, and Bruce was in Philly on the River Tour, and friends of mine. So I called my sister and I said, hey, can we get tickets? Can Michael get us tickets? Her boyfriend. I actually have a River Tour jacket, which is kind of cool. Can he get us tickets? So we did, and he couldn't. They sold the tickets at the box office, whatever happened. So it was me and my friend Donna, who was a huge Springsteen fan, and this guy Flip from Pittsburgh, who's a huge Springsteen fan. So it was just, and another, I think there's 4 of us. I forget who the 4th one was. Anyway, so I brought him home. They stayed with my parents, about 8 hours. We rode back to Philly. And so we ended up standing on the soundboard. Yeah, oh darn. And that's how I saw my first Springsteen show. And then the next night, they felt so bad about the tickets. We got box seats, great seats. It was at the Spectrum, so we got great seats. And that was the beginning, kind of the when it clicked for me, seeing him live. And then it kind of faded out again. Like, I didn't do the whole Human Touch and Lucky Town kind of thing, but I was in New York, and by then I was in Manhattan, and a friend of mine dated Toby Scott, the produced sound guy.
Okay.
And so that kind of got me started again. And then it was no, I guess it was before that. Before I moved to New York, I worked on Wall Street, and I was in administration in a branch office for Prudential Securities. And I would call the New York office all the time. And I talked to this guy every day on the New York office. He had an extra ticket. That was it. He had an extra ticket. So I went to meet him. I'd never met him, but I talked to him enough. And it was at the Brendan Byrne. And I don't remember which tour it was, but it had to be before Born in the USA. So I forget what it was. But anyway, but I remember at the end of it, first of all, there was somebody in front of me who was sound asleep like this in a chair, but he did Twist and Shout at the end, and the whole arena, you stood still, and the whole arena was just moving, and that was it. So, and then I kept getting, through my brother, I kept getting, tickets. I was lucky enough to see Born in the USA. And then it really, or maybe, I guess, I don't know when Lucky Town was after that or whatever, but, and then they stopped, and then the reunion tour happened, and I was back in Philly, and it was in '99, and my mom had just died, and it was my birthday. It was September 20th. He was at the Wachovia Center, then whatever it was, the Core States, I think then. And I went with this guy that I'm madly in love with, John Hunt. I couldn't believe it. And I got tickets through my funeral director, who's my best friend's family. So I got these great tickets, and I felt, and my mom died in July, and that was in September. And I felt, I felt healed. I lost myself completely in the music, and I cried, and I hadn't seen it. It had been so long since I'd seen them live, but it was so recent after my mom, and I was with John, and it was my birthday, and that kind of was it. And then my brother gave me tracks that year for Christmas, and I listened to stuff I had never heard before. So I kind of came into it late in the game, but I came back to it voraciously. And then I started traveling by myself to go see him. And, now I'm up to 35 shows, I think, and which is a lot, and
Yeah.
For some people. And so, and then I saw the reunion tour at Madison Square Garden, and I saw the reunion in Pittsburgh, like I a bunch of times. And then I really became obsessed, kind of more so than I ever was, and did a bunch of shows at Giant Stadium, and so that's really, I would say the reunion tour is what got me. And when I started listening to, like, the first time I heard The Wish or even Happy, I was like, yeah, this is me. And then, of course there's well, you'll get to my one song, but I assume.
Yeah.
So that's really how it started. And then, and it wasn't, then it became not about the music alone. It became about the people I met along the way.
Yeah.
So.
I want to talk more about the people, but you mentioned how much it meant to you and how emotional it was with losing your mom.
Yeah.
What about his music? Can you articulate, what is it, the lyrics? Is it the stories? What about this brought it with the experiencing him live? What brought you to the next level?
I truly felt I could be myself with 54,999 other people next to me, that I was all by myself. I remember I was getting a beer and Badlands came on, and I was like, to John, and I was like, I gotta go. And Badlands turned it for me, and because I knew it, and I could just do it. I could feel the physical expression of it. And I just got swept away. And of course it was that, he was doing his preacher, he was the preacher. It was a revival, and I felt revived. I could, my parents were married for 51 years, but probably, I don't know, 40 too many, maybe. So I wasn't able to really, I loved my parents. They, we had a great relationship, but they didn't, at the end, they were Catholic. They were together a long time.
Yeah.
So I couldn't kind of openly grieve, because that wasn't happening in with me and my dad. And I stayed on and took care of him for 4 years. Yeah. I lived with him for 4 years. So that was the first time that I could just let go.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it.
You're saying it well.
But the other part of it, and I don't think there's anyone else who is truly in concert, and the true meaning of being in concert with his fans, even on an off night, because we all know, you've seen enough times, when he's having an off night. Even an off night for Bruce is the best show you'll ever see.
Sure, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, everybody knows that, but he's in concert with us, and I felt like it was just me and him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's how it felt to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can also sing in public and don't care what people think, because I don't sing in public. And that's another thing of it.
Absolutely. We all we make a joyful noise unto the Lord. And in this case is yes, absolutely.
Indeed.
When you talked to, were you able to go see him on Broadway?
Oh, yeah, I saw him twice. So
yeah,
I got a phone call from a friend of mine who, unfortunately, he happened to have an extra ticket for an unsavory reason, and 14th row center. And so the first time I saw him, I was blown away. But it was so overwhelming. It was just so overwhelming. It was right there. And so the second time I saw him was in July after COVID, and I did the lucky seat, and I kept doing the every day you enter the thing, and I won, and I won 2 tickets, and I was with a friend of mine who we went to New York and stayed overnight and just had an absolute blast. But the show itself, it was after COVID, and it's that emotion was all there. And so I cried through the whole thing, and of course I can't help but think about his mother, and especially when he plays The Wish, and which is one of my top 5 songs ever. But knowing where she is and how their relationship, having seen them in Philly with her on stage, and that I just again, you feel in concert, because when he Did you see him on Broadway?
Yes.
Oh, good. So, like when he says that she has Alzheimer's or she doesn't, like the whole audience feels it, because that the guy next to you or the woman next to you, somebody in front of you, behind you, is going through the same thing.
So when I went, he had not yet started telling that his mom had Alzheimer's. Now,
oh wow, so that's in the beginning.
Yeah. So and so now I have a different story about the Wish. And listeners, if you've heard this story before, skip ahead, a minute or two, because my new friend Barbara has it. So I was listening to the Wish just randomly, and it started hitting me that I still have my mom.
Oh, yeah.
And that and like all parents and children, you have rough patches, but so I really started getting emotional. And so I called her from the car, and I was trying to explain to her this song and how, Bruce is writing this about his mom and how much she had given him. And I was trying to explain that to my mom. And my mom's like, what? I don't understand, Jesse Wayne. What are you talking about? What is this song? I was just like, I'm fine, Mom. How are you? And we just skipped on.
Well, the other thing about the Wish that I love so much,
yes,
is it's so visual. The
yes.
sound of her makeup case on the sink.
Yes.
Pink curlers in matador pants, picking me up off the couch to do the twist with my uncles and aunts. It's so visual, because I did the same thing.
Her
except
heels
I was doing,
walking to work. Yes.
Yes. Right. I mean, it gives me the chills, and now it's so much. And my mom died before I heard that song, that it became so important to me. So, I just empathize. You can't help it. You just can't help it. But it's just such a. And then you see Estelle, and you're like, that's her. It's lovely.
So the other half of that story is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. This was perfect. Just it made me think of this because of what you were saying. So it's Father's Day, and my son had never seen the Netflix special, and my wife had only seen a little bit of it and was like, this is too depressing, which was funny because right after she had said, I just can't keep watching this, is when Bruce says, okay, I'm gonna get you off suicide watch. So if she had done 5 more minutes. Anyway, so they're going through it. And when the Wish finishes, my son, who was 30, he's 31, 32. So he's like 31. And he's like, oh my God, that is an amazing song. Oh, God, that's as good a song. So I paused I paused Netflix, and I told him the story about Mimi, which is what he calls my mom. And he says, I love that song even more now, because I could just see, he says, I could see Mimi. What, Jesse Wayne? I don't. And so he could just see his mom. So yes. So that is, it is. And when I heard that he had started mentioning that, and you can hear videos and you see when he says, you'll know me.
Yes.
And he stops.
Yes.
And she won't know him anymore.
Nope.
And now that, now that he has talked, he has shared more when he came back from, when they revamped it, and you thought, I only saw it the first time. I didn't see it the second time. About, she has gotten to where she still lights up with music, even though she can't talk. Yeah. And I just think that's a beautiful story. It's a very beautiful story.
I think so too. And the love that they had, and she got to see him be successful. And yet, you read Born to Run and listen to him, and, he struggles just like everybody else. I mean, he really is, it's not, to me, it's not godlike. It's just like, he's waiting for the call. I know what it's like to wait for the call.
Yeah.
because it's going to
Yeah.
come, and he's going to feel just like everybody else. But he was a good boy. He was a good son.
Yeah.
And, somebody asked me one time, what would you ever say to him? I mean, the way I met him was completely not what I was expecting, but I would say, you're a good son. You're a good son. That's because he's a good son.
That's, I think that would make him very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to hear how you met him. I met him at a book signing in Austin, and it was, it was, a assembly line,
Yeah.
you walk in, you take your picture, you go, and I have no regrets. I understand. I knew what it was when I got in there, and as I told him, I had practiced what I was going to say, and I said, last year I spent 9 months unemployed. I listened to Better Days, Land of Hope and Dreams every day. That's what got me through it. Thank you for that. And I don't know if he heard it, but as I've said multiple times, I needed to say it more than I needed him to hear it. But it was enough. It was enough.
Yep.
And absolutely, if, on my wish list, I would love to talk to him on this podcast, of course, but, and he's on my fictional list of who do you want to have dinner with? But so you said you've met him. Tell me about it.
So I've always had the feeling, like after 99, I always had this feeling I would meet him somehow. Because he's so accessible.
Well, and there's been, to a certain degree, you guys have been on parallel tracks, like, with like things. Absolutely.
And kind of, you're certainly not on the same level, but in my small area, my restaurant was very successful, and I became kind of a local celebrity, and it was hard to go to the grocery store. And I think to myself, like, and that's like minuscule. I also was on Chopped, and I cut my finger and I got chopped, and people remembered me for that for a long time, which was hard. That's a funny story. But, and so take that and make it Bruce's life.
Right.
Like, I can't even imagine. And so I felt more normal after reading Born to Run, that, I get it. I get it. But anyway, so my fictional meeting would be, he would come into my restaurant and I would pretend I didn't know who he was. But I went to a friend of mine here in Chestertown, Maryland, is from not far from Asbury, grew up in Jersey, in this midshore. And so I got lucky and got tickets. I went online and got tickets during the, it was 2012. What was that? The Magic Tour? I forget which one.
Okay.
And I don't think it was Working on a Dream. Well, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But what was it?
I'm trying to think
2012.
too.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I got great tickets, and like
High
ridiculous.
Hopes. I think that might be High Hopes.
No, it wasn't High Hopes. It might have been.
No, 14 was High Hopes. So this must have been maybe the
was it
river.
Magic? No, it might have been Magic.
Okay.
Anyway.
My audience is screaming at me right now.
I know, me too. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a big fan. And this happened to me. So you might know the story. So anyway, it's in Philly, and Wrecking Ball. That was it. Thank you. So thank you. I don't want to wake up at 3 a.m. I got to get up at 5 and be like, Wrecking Ball.
Yes.
So anyway, so I go online, and for some reason I got 6th row beside the stage in Philly, like obscenely, ridiculously good tickets. And so I said, Jeff, I've got a ticket, and let's go. So we go to Philly, and we went with the kid. We brought a kid up at the local college. He's from Australia. He was here studying, huge Springsteen fan. So the 3 of us go, and we get, we go through the show. It's a great show. And Jeff is wearing a blue crew neck sweater and a button down underneath, looking very Catholic school. And I've got this hideous sweater on and thinking I look so cute. And it's the second to the last song. It's Raise Your Hand. And so I'm raising my hand and the whole thing. And I see some commotion down on the side, and we're in the middle of the row. And I said, Jeff, I think he's coming up the stairs. Like, get your camera. He's going over there. He's coming up the stairs. Well, with that, next thing I know, like we look over at where everybody's looking and he's catwalking across the seats. So he stopped and I'm like, Jeff, he's right there. Like, this is unbelievable. And then he kept going. And, you said something to me. You said, you don't think he heard you. So, and I said the same thing to my friend, and I'll tell you, who's a DJ in Columbus.
Okay.
And when he interviewed me, and I said, I don't think he really saw us. And he said, he saw you. And anyway, he come, next thing you know, he's at my seat and looked down. And that's what I saw in the video afterwards. He looked at like, okay, I haven't seen them 100 times. They're not dressed in black. They're not from Jersey. And he put his hand down on Jeff's shoulder and Jeff put him in the seat. And, it was my 33rd show or 32nd show at the time. And I had gotten a cold beer in the middle of it. And I instinctively, being the restaurant professional that I am, hospitality, I leaned down and I said, do you want a beer? And he shook his head. He's kind of nodded his head. And I gave him the beer and he sipped it and he saw it was cold. And he stood up and he said to the entire audience, I'll be right with you. I got a cold beer. He sat down. He drank the beer. And there was this woman behind me who was trying to like get on him. And I'm like elbowing, like he was so sweaty and stinky. And drank the beer, stood up, tossed the cup, and off he went. And it went viral. There was a guy named Lance from New Orleans who videotaped it and sent it to TMZ. And the next day we were on CBS and Entertainment Tonight. So if you Google Bruce drinks beer in Philly, that was me in my J. Jill flowered sweater that I never wore again because it was not cute. But I still have it. And the purple shoes I was wearing, I still have those. And that was it. And off he went. And the fact that Bruce Springsteen would climb into the stands and drink a stranger's beer was pretty incredible. So
yeah, I remember that. I know he did a couple of those, and this was
after me.
Yes, I know that. Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I remembered being, because this was before the autobiography.
Yeah.
And Clarence had talked about, in his book about no drinks and no drugs, right? And that the band had to be careful about. And so I didn't know till after, reading the autobiography, he talked about he wasn't a surly drunk like his father. He ended up being, when he drank it didn't wake up the demons. So he learned he could casually drink. So that's a great moment. So you can say, oh yeah, I shared a beer with Bruce. That's pretty good.
Are you kidding? I ride that thing like a one-trick pony. I tell everybody.
That
was like
too.
My greatest line at tables in the restaurant. I'm like, oh, really? Google this. So,
well, see,
but I don't remember it.
You don't remember it all?
I remember, and it's funny because the kid from Australia was way up at the top, and he's like, he couldn't believe we were just in a car together 3 hours before, and then a friend of mine from high school was there, and I ran into her in the lobby, and she said, "I saw you." So. But I remember at the very end of the video, I throw my head back, like all the way back. My mouth is wide open. Like I just couldn't believe it. And that of all the places he could have gone. But I remember how sweaty he was. He was really, he was soaking wet, absolutely soaking wet. And he's tiny. He's so tiny. So.
Well, you tweeted the picture. It's a screen image. So I will include that when I put out the podcast. So very nice.
Fun. It was fun.
That's good. After that, I hate to ask, any other stories from live shows you want to share? Because I mean, that pretty makes,
no. There's, I would say, I mean, I saw him in London I saw him in London on the Seeger sessions, and that was really fun. And that was the first time I had been in the pit. But again, it really is the people that I've met going to these shows that I still talk to. And I would imagine you probably have those same experiences, people that you connect with. And that's kind of the thing. It just, we're all there for the same reason.
Mhm.
you know, for some spiritual
Yeah.
awakening somehow. I mean, I'll be honest, I couldn't go to show after show and travel and go see the show and, you know, travel all over the country and do that all the time. But it's so few and far between that when you get it, you know, everybody else gets that you get it too. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So, and I would say too, you know, for me, as Janie, Don't You Lose Heart is my song. Like
Okay.
that, I was working at a country club here, and you know, I'm a restaurant chef, and that country club mentality was, you know, it's I didn't belong to one, I had never
Okay.
been to one, and here I was running one, and it was an interesting experience. But by the time I was 50, I turned 50 and I went to Italy. It's like, I'm going to go to Italy. I'm not going to be 50 here. And so I met this woman. She cooked for me. Anyway, I didn't know at the time that the guy that we were with, the guide, said, do you want to meet the woman that cooked your meal? Because I was miserable. And I said, I can't, I'm a chef in America, but I can't cook anymore. My knees are bad, this and that. And, you know, I was broken. I didn't realize, you know, what it was. So I went home, and I remember one night I was sitting out on my porch. It was a beautiful night, and I was listening to a compilation thing I put together once I got the iPod and figured out how to do that and make my own set list. And Janie was on, and I was like, that's me. That's really me. I do come home and write things. I write down ideas about my restaurant that I want to do and all this stuff. And that really, you know, helped me. Like, you know, I heard like, and I was like that, and that's my song. That's the one that gets me through professionally anyway. And within a year and a half, I had opened the restaurant. So there's a lot more than just the physical being in concert. Although I did walk into the men's room in London. I was at Wembley, and the English are not really fun to go watch a Springsteen
Okay.
show with. Sorry, guys, but you know, there's a lot of sitting down, and I was by myself, and
Yeah.
so I had a couple beers, and they're English beers, and I was jet lagged. I was only there for the weekend, you know,
Right.
and so I came out of the show, and I'm all happy, and I went right into the bathroom, and I went right into the men's room. So there's my other story.
Did you, was there any Bruce angle in your restaurant? Did you have anything Bruce themed or?
Oddly, I did not.
Wow.
I did not. I told the story more than anything, but
Sure.
I'm a single woman. I've never been married, didn't come from any money and stuff. So I did this thing on a budget.
Sure.
And so I took all the pictures off my walls at home, and I threw my dead relatives up, and I made it super homey, and that's how I did it. But no, I didn't have any Springsteen, and I mean, it was always on.
Yeah.
It was on the radio. I mean, on the Spotify and stuff, but
Yeah.
no, I don't. And it's a good question. I don't know. I don't really have anything. I'm not a memorabilia gal.
Mhm.
So I don't have posters and stuff like that. So I just go right in. I just, you know, he just climbs in my seat and drinks my beer.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't need that
just,
stuff.
I thought maybe you'd come up with a, you know, if Bruce and Patty were coming, this would be the meal I'd cook. So this is the boss
Yes.
meal, right?
That I did. Oh, I always thought, what would I do if he came in?
So tell me, I'm curious.
How would I handle it? I would probably, you know, I don't know, throw up or something first. But
yeah,
you know, I've been around famous people.
Sure.
So and I also know how much, you know, my dad said to me one time, I forget, and my dad was alive when in 99. So after he started touring more.
Yeah.
So he got to see me coming home from Springsteen shows, which was really fun. And I got to share that with him. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No, what would you cook, Patty and
so what would I cook them? But I think they eat. I would do my grilled oysters because they're really good. I would like to they're fantastic. And I would leave them alone, I think.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
absolutely.
And but I would definitely do a fish because I did a lot of fish and it's really
Yeah.
simple and clean. No, I'm not a dot and smear chef.
Yeah.
I worked for Bobby Flay. There's lots of salsas and
Yeah.
big flavors. And, or hopefully he would eat my meatloaf and mashed potatoes and glazed carrots, which is my biggest seller, and
I
mushroom
would
gravy.
say, I love this. This made me remember home. Um, the odds are, right, that who would have thought that being on Chopped wasn't your moment of glory? It was
Yeah,
Bruce stealing your beer or
exactly.
taking your beer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It definitely, Chopped was really fun. I mean, I loved it.
Yeah.
I made good TV.
Yeah.
But
I'll have to go
yeah,
look up your episode now.
yeah, it's called Oh My Goshi, Omaboshi. So it's, yeah. So and I did really well, but I cut just the very tip of my pinky.
Okay.
And I put a band, they don't show everything, but I put the
Sure.
Band-Aid on. I had the glove on. The glove was too big, and it was, to me, it was more dangerous to keep it on. And but then of course they zoom in on the little tiny speck of blood and
Yeah.
say, yeah. So, but it was funny because Jeffrey Zakarian, he's a judge on there all the time, was one of my judges, and he said, and this is kind of Bruce related. He said, there they show the lineup, and he said, we know you're disappointed because I cry a lot, and he said, and I said, yes. And he said, but we're disappointed in you. And my head just went down. And all I could think of was like right back into Catholic school. I spent a lot of time in detention. Yeah. I talk a lot. And I felt that disappointment, like, it took me right back to Catholic school.
Yeah.
And, and I think, yeah, Bruce talks about it in his music all the time, but that it never goes away. It really doesn't ever go away. It really doesn't. Like, you're never good enough.
Don Henley was on a radio show. He lives here. I don't know if he still lives in Dallas, but for a while he was living in Dallas, and he called into some sports station or thing. And he said that he has a theory that all of us spend our adult trying to get over high school.
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that.
There is. And I wish I knew now. I didn't realize that I had as many friends as I did in high school, and so when I came home from Oregon in 99 and moved back from Portland, I had a brother out there that always helps. There's one in Colorado too, so I'm pretty set up. I reconnected for my high school reunion. It was my, I guess at that time, 20-year high school reunion. And I mean, I was like, these people are really nice, and they liked me, and I had no idea. And so rocket ahead 20 years, and it's now August 9th, 2014 or 2021, and I'm closing the restaurant, and it's the last weekend, and I didn't have anybody to work, and down came Chris Foley from Philadelphia, who sat behind me in homeroom and came down and waited tables like she retired from Quaker Oats. I mean, and she came down and waited tables for me. And then next thing you know, there's somebody from grade school. We all went to high school together. They surprised me on the last day, and there's 5 of 6 of us standing on my deck. Like, I could never imagine that would happen ever.
That's awesome.
It's really cool. Yeah. It's really cool. So as the demons that it leaves you with, it also left you with, and you asked me about growing up. We all knew each other's brothers and sisters. We had big families then. And so there was always a McKenna and an Esmonde and a Foley and oh, you're one of the Foley girls or something. And so, but we did have this kind of great childhood where you could just kind of get out and go.
Yeah.
So
are there friendships you've made seeing Bruce perform live? Like, are there people that you've run into and kind of developed a long distance friendship with?
Absolutely.
Or is it okay? Just share a little bit about that. So
I was at Giant Stadium. I forget what tour it was. It was the outside part of it. And I was in the pit, but it was really crowded and I just didn't like it, so I just moved to the back of the pit. And I met this woman. Her name was Lisa Stern from Arizona. and we still keep in touch to this day, not all the time. And sometimes it's through just, messages, or if I, when I post things on Facebook that's, cool or whatever, just something she likes, especially at the restaurant. So she, and we'll talk back and forth. And then there's another woman, another Lisa from Jersey, and she's hardcore. She's like, she was always in the pit. Like, she knows people. Yeah. And she's awesome. And Land of Hope and Dreams and we're both Virgos, and we met in Asbury Park and spent one drunken, ridiculous night. I was ready to move to Asbury. My boxes were packed. I was going to open a restaurant in Asbury. I believed in Asbury, and that I came back and my toenails had glitter polish on them. I called my friend at 8 a.m. I said, I am not moving here. But Lisa and I stayed in touch, and we still do. And follow each other. But yeah, I mean, I know that there's, with Spring Nuts, I think, is a big group, and certainly Backstreets, and that, I mean, when I went to London for that weekend, this guy reached out and said, hey, I'll come pick you up at your hotel and drive you around London before the show. And I didn't even hesitate. I'm sure,
Sure, absolutely.
Sure. And he did, and I saw everything I needed to see, and almost thought I was going to lose my life, because driving in London is absurd. But but yeah, I didn't even hesitate to get in the car with him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
songs or albums that mean a lot to you. You mentioned that there's one song. So besides Janie, is Janie?
Well, Janie and The Wish, I think, are the ones that mean something. The ones that I love. I mean, I'm kind of weird. I mean, I really like. I love Drive All Night. That's so romantic, but live, I mean, I don't think I love Bus Stop. I love Spirit in the Night. I have to say that. I know it's controversial, but I don't have the same feeling for Badlands anymore, I think. But not to say I won't raise my fist.
But I understand.
And of course, seeing Jungle Land live and I think it's really cool. So here's another connection. So after I moved home, I started taking a jazzercise class at the Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
And so I was Chef Barb, and hi, Chef Barb. And they all knew I loved Springsteen, blah, blah, blah. Well, turns out that the woman who stood in the front row, her cousin got this job playing the organ for Bruce Springsteen.
Oh,
so Charlie Giordano is her cousin.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah. So I am going to London.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlie gave me I have text messages from Charlie. We were gonna meet and have coffee in London, but he broke a reed on the accordion. I think accordions have reeds. Yes.
Yeah.
But I get this long message from him, and so I asked him, so we had messaged back and forth. I guess maybe it was email. I guess it wasn't even text messaging then. Probably not. Yeah. But and I said, so, this is so new. Will you tell me what is it like? How is it? And what's the one song? And that, he said Jungle Land, having to learn Jungle Land was the one. And that Bruce was generous and kind and incredibly hardworking. I forgot all about that until just now.
Wow, that's
the woman in my jazzercise class. Yeah, so Charlie, so I was this close to having coffee with Charlie, who couldn't have been nicer in his emails to his cousin's friend.
That's very sweet. That's really nice.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you.
Sure, please.
Bruce, and I'll tell you quickly. My dad. So I was lucky enough to, when I worked for Bobby Flay, to do an event for Julia Child on her 80th birthday at the Rainbow Room in New York. Yeah. So there I am in the kitchen shucking oysters, and Bobby's yelling my name. And finally I'm like, what? And he said, she's here. So he got me up. And so the Rainbow Room kitchen is just enormous. It's so long, and it's just banks of stoves, and it's huge. And so there she was at the front of the kitchen, and Bobby got me up to her to meet her. When he invited me to do it with him, he said, I said, oh, my mom was a librarian, and she processed all the books. So any of the good stuff she would bring home, any good cookbook stuff. So I have a 61, I was born in 61, edition of Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And so he said, when you go, bring your book. So I happened to bring my cookbook with me. So anyway, long story short, it's just before the event, and she was doing them all over the country, and chefs would, like in every big city, and all the chefs would get together and do this dinner. So I met her, and I don't remember that either in real life, except that she was very tall. She sounds exactly like you would think. And then at the end of the night, Bobby said, go get your cookbook. And I said, oh, she's really tired. It's the end of the night. He said, go get your book. So I have my signed Julia's Child cookbook, which is my prized possession. And had he not thrown the cup, I would have kept the cup. But anyway, my father said to me, and I was telling him, and he said, because she knows how much it means to all of you to meet her. And Bruce absolutely personifies that to me as well. Yeah. So you've seen recently, he's down in Manasquan. I went to a wedding in Point Pleasant. My head was like this the whole time. Yeah. Like, is he here? Is he here? But he knows how much it means to people to meet him. I think so too. Yeah. Or he wouldn't do it. Yeah, I agree. Why would he go take a picture at the beach? He could easily not be doing this in a picture like he does, And I just think that is the coolest, realest thing. And I met Patty. When she did Rumble, I guess it was Rumble Doll. No, not Rumble Doll. The other one, 23rd Street Lullaby, which I loved. I loved that album. And I got lucky enough to be picked to be in the audience on the CBS morning show or whatever she was doing. And then I got to stay at the end when she did the rope line. And I said to her, and she has this one song about God, about the dishwasher. And he must be one of God's good children. God's got him doing dishes all night in the back. And I said to her, if you could put that song in Spanish, you would make so many dishwashers happy. Right. And she was like, oh, that she's so nice. And she was so nice. And I said, you were in my neighborhood recently. I live near, live near the Devon Horse Show. Yes, we stayed at the Wayne Hotel, and next year we're going to bring my mother. And she could not have been nicer. They're just nice. That's nice. And I left that thinking, no wonder he picked her. Yeah. They're very similar. Mm-hmm. So that's nice. That's nice. Yeah. So that's very nice. 6 degrees of Bruce. There you go. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And and who knows? It still might work out. Yep. The day's not over. There you go. Yeah. When they tour again, are there songs you're still chasing? Is there songs you want to hear live that you haven't got to hear? Not really. Okay. I've been pretty lucky. Although oddly enough, I would love to hear Wrecking Ball again live, because I really loved Wrecking Ball. Mm-hmm. But I can't wait to hear the 1,000 Guitars, and If I Were a Prince. I can't wait to hear that. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to, I listened to that over and over. And what I think is really cool too is, because of the rooftop sessions, the bleachers, I have discovered the bleachers because of Chinatown and Bruce in Chinatown. And so it's opened a whole new avenue to their music to me, which I'm obsessed with. Absolutely. Oh, that's cool. Obsessed. Yeah, it's really cool. And I was like, I'd love to go see them. And then I look at the videos and like, everybody's 12. But I work with young kids, and I'm not married. I don't have kids to tarnish me. So there you go. Tarnish me, but so I think I'm still one of them. So good for you. Well, any final thoughts before we get to the Mary question? To the just how grateful I am to kind of be part of this community, and how lucky we all are that this man is such a chameleon in
Yeah,
so many ways, that we get to experience him in so many forms. It's just it's not godlike worship or anything like that. It's like I said, it's the people that I meet along the way. It's not just him. So
absolutely. Well said. Well said.
thank
All
you.
right. So if you are listening to this podcast because you went to high school with Barbara, or you perhaps are supporting her because of her Chopped appearance, or because you loved her restaurant, thank you for listening.
Thanks.
I end every episode with the Mary question. What the Mary question is Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher. He is recently retired. When he was teaching, he would spend 2 days having his class break apart Thunder Road. They
Oh
would look
boy.
at the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery Bruce used. They would kind of talk about, compare it to other American poets like Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. And then at the end of the 2 days, Jay would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? So, Barbara, that's the question. Does
Yes,
Mary get in the car? She
I think
does?
so. I think so.
Okay, tell
I
me
think
why.
so. Because the idea, like I'm easily influenced,
Okay.
and I think that, especially with the imagery of his, the Catholic imagery in through all of it, that you want to break out, and here's somebody giving you the opportunity. We all wanted to get rid of our plaid uniforms.
Yeah,
We all wanted to hike up our skirts and take off our knee socks.
right.
And to me, it the funny it I remember the first time I heard, like, I was at a big party and we turned on Born to Run when I had a house at the shore, and we turned on Born to Run, and I slammed the screen door at the same time as the song came on, and these guys were all like a bunch of tough guys, and it just felt like rebellion to me, and the imagery, it could be a quiet summer day and the screen door slams, but I don't think so.
Okay.
And yeah, I think that, like I said, we all wanted to get rid of our plaid skirts and just get the hell out.
Very
and uh,
nice.
and now here we all are. We're
Here we
still
are.
in our plaid skirts. We can never get out of the damn things. So
Well said. Well
so,
said.
thank you.
Uh, Barbara, if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
I am on Facebook, I guess, under my name, and and my Twitter is Babs on the Bee.
Yes.
Um, but I forgot. I don't even know.
Yeah, that is. It's
But
Babs on the
that's
Bee.
the easiest. That's the easiest
Okay,
way to
good.
find me, and I hope that we'll all see each other soon,
I hope
somewhere
so
in
too.
some arena somewhere, and
Absolutely.
uh,
Yes.
and
That sounds
we all
great.
we all
And
stay healthy and
yes, well, and if he
employed.
tours and you get down to Dallas, I'll take you to a couple of my favorite restaurants and
Oh, I
we'll
would love
talk
it. I've
food.
never been to Texas. I would
There,
love that.
that sounds
I would
great.
love that.
All
All
right.
right,
Barbara, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you. Go get vaccinated, go get boosted.
please. Yep.
Please be kind to each other because that's what this world needs so much now. Thank
Yep.
you, Barbara. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you
Thank you,
soon.
Jesse. It was
Bye.
great. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bruce Springsteen Live provides fans with an intimate look into Springsteen's creative process. The Bruce Springsteen Live exhibit opens at the Woody Guthrie Center on Saturday, April 16th, running through Sunday, September 25th. The exhibit will feature iconic artifacts, live performance footage, instruments, stage costumes, exclusive interviews, concert posters, and photography, as well as unique interactive displays to immerse fans in Bruce Springsteen and the band's creative process. More information can be found at woodyguthrieCenter.org. Please let them know that Set Listing Bruce sent you there, and I'll see you in Tulsa. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at SetListingBruce, and my personal Twitter is at JesseJacksonDFW. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.